Okay, so this video is going to be their first jump into the first topic here, which is an introduction to sociology, introduction to some of the key people, concepts and ideas, but really an overall orientation to this study of social life, which we call sociology here. Now, this video in particular covers these outcomes, these learning outcomes. These are in your Space page uh, on the read section on Brightspace. And so where you're going to be reading the specific links here for the online textbook. Actually, for this video here, there's going to be two pages, two sections of the first chapter online. That is the first introduction to what sociology is. And after this video and after doing the reading, these are all things you should be able to do. So explain what sociology is, what it does, define this concept of the sociological imagination, and so on. You'll also see on that read page in Brightspace, I'll also be giving you, for each topic, a list of key terms that connect to the reading and the lecture videos. And so these are things to make sure you should be able to define, explain, provide examples for, or find examples from the lecture videos or the reading and you'll be able to, so you should be able to recognize these both for the tests in this class, but also the journal posts and journal entries that you're going to make for the other assignment for this particular class. So this first video here, we're just going to really just over a broad introduction and definition of what sociology is. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to also on the online textbook that we're reading, William Little's Intro to Sociology textbook, you'll see in and amongst each of the pages, the chapters, there'll be these boxes of boxes of information. So this is one from this first chapter, and they're these shaded boxes and they have similar titles, main titles. Anyways, so some of these you don't need to read. They're good, optional and additional information. So for example, in this first chapter, there's this one on choices of Indigenous gang members. And so this video, it is supplementary to the other information in the chapter. It's a good example of some of the key ideas of sociology applied to a specific aspect of study, specifically Indigenous gang members. So this one's optional here. However, on the last page of the online first chapter here, there is this box about farming and locavores, how sociological perspective might view food consumption. And actually this one, it is required that you do take a look at this. And in another video here later on in this first topic, we're going to be, actually, I think it's maybe next week. Oh yeah, it says right here, next week. Next week, we're going to look at some sociological theories, and this box of information is a really good example of how to apply these theories to a specific focus of study. So I just wanted to highlight that before we got into the lecture videos here. Okay, so I first want to introduce you to my favorite sociologist. This is C. Wright Mills, and C. Wright Mills was an American sociologist in the 1940s and 50s, and actually one of the most influential contemporary sociologists. And I know it's weird saying contemporary because it was 1940s and 50s. But C. Wright Mills was a sociology instructor, professor at Columbia University from 1946 to 1962. His emphasis and his study, focus of study was on social classes, status, power. He actually was a little bit of a rebel, or maybe a big rebel. He was a self-proclaimed outsider. So to quote him, he said he was an outlander, not only regionally, but deep down and for good. So he really understood sociology as a political endeavor. Uh, uh, and he in his work he took on the rich and the powerful. He challenged his more conservative colleagues, and actually challenged the American government at the time. And actually his critique of American society caught the attention of the FBI at the time, and they had a file on him for a little bit. So part of that's why I like him. We'll come back to him a little later in another video, but it's really his one main contribution, which is this notion of a sociological imagination, is why he's my favorite. But another reason why I kind of like him is he described himself as a wobbly. So this is right from one of his books here. So just to quote him, a wobbly is not only a man who takes orders from himself, he doesn't like his bosses, be they capitalistic, or communistic. They're all the same to him. A wobbly wants to be, and he wants everyone else to be, his own boss at all times, under all conditions, for all purposes that they may want to follow up. This is what he calls wobbly freedom. So what he means by this is, and I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on this, is that this wobbly freedom is sort of a freedom from and a different way of looking at one's own life and their circumstances. So Mills, in his work, he observed that nowadays men only feel that their private lives are a series of traps. What ordinary men are directly aware of and what they're trying to do are bounded by the private orbits in which they live. Their visions and their powers are limited to close-up scenes of their job, their family, their neighborhood only. So what he meant by this was that is because most people are unaware of the intricate connections between their own private orbits, and the connection between them and larger social forces and conditions and patterns that constrain them. And so as a result, he said, most people find it difficult, if not impossible, to grasp the interplay between an individual and society that they're living in, and the history of the social world in which they're living in. So he said, if most people find it difficult to see the interconnection between themselves, man, and the society they're in, or just put another way, their own individual biography and the social history of the society culture they're a part of, or they're unable to grasp the difference, or not, sorry, the interconnection between their own sense of self and the world in which they're living in. So this is sociology's focus. This is what Mills encouraged everyone to do, encouraged the students to do, we need to shift sort of our perspective, instead of just thinking only about ourselves and understanding our own private orbits. We need to look at the individual within society. And that's sociology. That's what sociology does. Broadly speaking, a sociological perspective is the systematic study of social behavior and social interactions for the purposes of understanding human behavior. And there's actually kind of three main aspects to this definition. I'm going to look at it as the kind of the what of sociology, the how, and the why of sociology. We'll start with the what. So what is kind of the main focus, a little bit more specifically, of sociology? So the what of sociology is really the study of social behavior and social interactions, which really covers everything, from individual, minute, maybe even fleeting interactions that you might have with one other person. Say you're passing another person on the street, on the sidewalk, walking one day. That's the subject of sociological study for some people, all the way up to kind of the global patterns and experiences of poverty, uh, around the world, and looking at that. So everything from kind of minute to broad global behavior. And so what's on the screen here is, just some other sort of ways to word that. So it's the look at, personal, intimate things we do. So all the way up to large scale social issues or structures. It's the study of more broadly things like gender, ethnicity, or race and class, religion, and so on. And then it's also just the study of everything and the everyday, anything that we do, is taking place within a social context, and sociologists study that. More specifically, within this study of social behavior, as I've sort of already said, it's everything from, intimate, experiences and behaviors up to more global or broader things. So we can talk about there being three different levels of sociology. And so starting at the micro level, we have the micro level of analysis is to focus on the social dynamics of intimate or face-to-face, human interactions. It's the study of things, for example, of conversational patterns, how we talk to one another, what we say to one another. It's the study of how family members, interact with one another, how we interact and behave within a work environment and with our work associates, or our friends. So it's a study of those intimate and personal one-on-one interactions. Macro level sociology focuses on the properties of large-scale, society-wide social interactions and behaviors that extend beyond the immediate sort of milieu of individual interactions. So macro level sociology looks at things like the dynamics within various social institutions. So for example, what happens within schools or educational institutions, what happens within governments or religious institutions or organizations. Another sort of focus of macro sociology would be looking at class structures, looking at experiences and behaviors of rich versus poor groups of people in society, and anyone in between. Gender relations, race relations, and so on. That would be macro level. Global level, lastly, is the biggest sort of level, and it is literally global. Global level sociology focuses on variables, on structures and processes that extend beyond the boundaries of any one government or nation or specific society. So, for example, global level, studies look at things like issues of climate change and how climate change are impacting on different people around the world. They look at the introduction of things like new technologies, and again, how that's different in one nation versus another. The images of popular culture as they spread around the world, the tensions of international trade or economics. That would be the global level kind of focus of sociology. Now, regardless of the level of sociology, micro, macro, or global, the focus of sociology is on variables, regardless of the level, the what of sociology is essential to the search for what we call social facts. Which are, there's a little definition here on the screen. Social facts are pattern ways of acting, thinking, feeling that exist outside of any one individual, but exert control over people over all people. Think about how your different social characteristics, like your gender or your age or your role as a student or a neighbor, think about how those exert some compelling social force over you and lead you to act in sociologically and socially predictable ways. These ways of acting are based on the social character, sorry, these ways of acting are based on social characteristics, or what we call social facts. And we will explore, these, this particular process a little later on in the course. But for now, I did a little elaboration and example of this. And I'm actually going to get you to think about how, for example, your age, compels you to work in a certain way. But Emil Durkheim is one of the founding sociologists, founding thinkers that we sort of look at the origins of sociology. Emil Durkheim was kind of there from the beginning, and it was actually him that started this definition and this discussion of and the search for social facts. And this is how he describes them and it's personal to him here. So Durkheim says, when I perform my duties as a brother or a husband or a citizen of, and Durkheim was a French sociologist. So when I perform my duties as any of these things, brother, husband, citizen, and carry out the commitments I have entered into by virtue of those roles, he says, I fulfill obligations which are defined in my actions. Sorry, I forgot an A there. My apologies. Even when they are conformed to my own sentiments, and when I feel, very personally connected to these duties and these obligations, he says, that reality does not cease to be objective, for it is not I who have prescribed these duties. So, for example, it's not Durkheim who prescribed how a husband is supposed to act and live up to that responsibility. So it's not I who have prescribed these duties. I have received these through education. And this is another, obviously we're going to come back to a lot of this later on in more detail, but this education which tells us how we're supposed to act as, brother or sibling or husband or spouse. We learn about that, and it truly is an education, but in sociology, we call it socialization. And so we'll look at that process later on. But for now, social facts have three essential characteristics. And so what I have here on the screen is actually just copy and pasted from our online textbook here from Little's online textbook there. And so just these three social facts social facts include three key features. One, a social fact is something that's developed prior to and it's separate from any one individual. So for example, you don't invent or create social facts as they apply to you, and neither do I. They sort of exist before us and are separate from any one individual. Another feature of social facts are that social fact is characteristic of any one particular group. And in fact, when we look at and compare group to group, when we compare group to group, different groups are going to have different social facts. So going back to Emil Durkheim's, he talks about how it's a social fact, how he's supposed to behave as a husband in French society in the 1800s. And in American society, probably that the duties and obligations of spouses or husbands was different than compared to what Emil Durkheim had to go through. So social facts are characteristic of any one particular group. And I'll give you another example of that. For instance, today, young Canadian men, for example, they like to watch sports while drinking beer. This is a social fact that explains why so many beer commercials we see feature young men watching sports and to sell the beer. So that's a social fact. Third characteristic of a social fact is that a social fact involves constraining or coercing forces that push individuals into acting in a particular way. So our example here of young men, drinking and watching sports. So when young men watching sports succumb to what some people call beer pressure, and so this explains that and how that might lead to yelling and high-fiving and displaying of other behavior associated with that social fact. So sociology, therefore, is about looking for the social facts. And in this is how we go beyond focusing on the individual only, those private orbits, or any one individual person, to examine larger social forces and how different parts of society function together. So this kind of leads us to the how of sociology in that. So how do we look at that and how do we study all of that? So sociology is a science ultimately, and therefore this means it involves the systematic study of human society and social interaction. Sociologists carefully gather information about society through direct observation or interaction with the subjects of their study, which ultimately are people and people in society. So if you want to understand the impact, for example, that television has on teenagers or the phenomenon of youth crime, you must gather data from those involved in those and impacted by those activities and base your conclusions on that information. Now, in week 3 of the course here and topic 2, where we're going to look at sociological research methods in a little more detail. But for now, I just want to recognize the purpose of gathering information or evidence in these ways is to gather data in order to develop theoretical explanations. And as well, we're going to look at next week, we're going to look at some of the major sociological theories. So I've listed them here on the screen. We're going to look at some of these major sociological theories, but for now, we just need to know that these theories help us explain why people behave in a certain way. Another way to put it is seeing the theory helps us see the general in the particular, to see the general or the social in the individual. So we look at seemingly unique social events and or circumstances, and then the theory helps us to recognize larger forces or patterns that may exist in that as well. So this then finally leads us to the why of sociology, which is, the main aim of sociology is to ultimately understand or explain how human behavior is shaped by group life or social life, how our behavior is shaped by things like our relationship with other people, but also how it's shaped by larger institutions like the government or laws or the economy or culture that we live in. And so it's for this very reason that many sociologists believe that sociology can be quite liberating. Remember C. Wright Mills's wobbly freedom. This sort of the same thing here. Sociology promises to broaden your sense of what you can do with your life by showing how your actions are a product of broader social and historical forces, and how some people can and do, act to alter those social forces and thus, ultimately improve the quality of our lives. So that hopefully is a bit of an introduction here. I'm going to end here with, again, a little bit of information from the online textbook, and it's the 4th page. So, and that's headed Why Study Sociology, because this is the why question. And I really like the introduction that the textbook gives for why it's important to study sociology. He give some really practical examples here, and specifically kind of talking about the development of social services like healthcare, but education, and that sort of stuff in Canada. And so what I've copied here on the screen is right from your textbook there. So we can look at the direct contributions of sociology and sociologists to linking it to the creation of a public healthcare system in Canada. But not just that, it's we see sociology playing a really crucial role in equal opportunity for women in the workplace. Improved treatment of individuals with mental and learning disabilities, increased recognition and accommodation for people from different racial backgrounds, the creation of hate crime legislation, and the rights of Indigenous populations, and so on and so on and so on. So this is also, again, this is why I love sociology, because of this very practical and positive application of every aspect of what sociology attempts to do here.